Everything is awesome. Everything is cool when you're part of AP. So here I am doing my final analysis for my linguistics class, and I'm going to analyze students in my AP US History class. So a little bit about Wood River High School and our demographics. About 40% of our student body is Latino. Currently, according to our ESL department, 38 have ELD plans and 26 are being monitored, and about 242 are former LEP students. We have a dual immersion program, a Hispanic outreach coordinator, and a special class specifically for first-time AP and honors students called GRIT to give them support, especially to our Latino populations. Thomas Jefferson once said, "Educate and inform the whole mass of the people, and they are the only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty." And that's no more true yesterday than it is today. It is immensely important that we educate all of our students so that we can move forward as a nation. And that means that we have to read men like Thomas Jefferson, which is very challenging language, 18th century language for students who are not LEP or FLEP, and therefore it's equally or more challenging for those students. So what does this mean when I teach? Well, hopefully I know my kids better than Ben Stein. Bueller. I have to know the kids I teach in order to get them where they need to go. So a little bit about the demographics of my classes this year. I have 5 classes that I teach. I have 3 AP US History classes totaling 54 students, and about 9 of them, sorry, I was reading something wrong, are FLEP students, and 8 of those kids are dual immersion students. In a conversation with my principal, he said he wasn't too worried about our kids in AP when we were talking about the achievement gap. While I agree that most of these kids tend to have language advantages above their peers, they were surrounded by lots of books when they were little, parents who read to them, and parents who were involved in the educational process. This is not the case for all of my students. In the last year, we have had a significant push to get more Latinos to take advanced opportunity classes, and my numbers reflect this. Many of the students are former LEP students who have been exited and or are dual immersion students, and our model for the district's DI program has been 50% of the population being Anglo and 50% of the population being Latino. So here we go. My classes are starting to reflect the student body. This is my AP US History class last year. Most of my AP kids are 10th graders, which is unusual for an AP US History class. Nationally, the norm is to take it in 11th grade. So they're behind developmentally as well. We have inclusive enrollment, not exclusive. Anybody can take my class. Specific push to get more Latino students. It's a high level of reading and high levels of expectations for all kids in that class. This is the arrangement in my class, just so that we know when we're talking about activities that I do. These are tables, and 2 students sit per table. I do want to note I have this awesome group of Latinas that are in my 4th hour class, and they sit all together in the back exhibiting awesome girl power. So my textbook is thick and wieldy, but that is because there's a lot of information and content to be learned in AP US History. It is an extremely challenging class, and in fact, most kids struggle in this class. We work on a growth mindset in my class. There's a great quote from the Stand to Deliver film, and it says, "There are some teachers in this room that would have troubles passing the AP test." Isn't that the truth? So class expectations. Let's talk about what is expected of students in my class, and how do I get all kids from point A to point B when the bar is raised so high? Well, first, they are expected to have some pretty sophisticated oral language proficiency. They have to use content, vocabulary, and examples in spoken language to actually discuss history. We do shared inquiry dialogues. We do Socratic seminars and debates and simulations in my class. So when I look at the WIDA can-do descriptors, specifically with oral language proficiency, you might wonder if I have oral language proficiency, since I have such a hard time with that word. The WIDA descriptors most kids are reaching with regards to speaking, listening, reading, and writing. They tend to be intermediate or advanced LEP category, bordering on advanced, although I would argue some of my students are still at the intermediate stage despite being exited from LEP programs. So they have to show complex vocabulary usage. This becomes problematic in my class at times. I have to know these kids, and it's assumed that students who are FLEP are fluent, but really they're often below their peers in vocabulary development, reading levels, lexile levels, etc. So while this is a college level class, I must structure my class to accommodate their language development and their developmental stage. Most students in this class show high levels of oral proficiency in English. I have several students who show high levels of social oral language proficiency but struggle with academic language proficiency. This is most evident with students when they are asked to answer specific questions in class regarding content, specifically in shared inquiry dialogues and Socratic seminars. One particular student stands out in this regard. He is unable to do much but repeat what he has already been said in class. He tends to avoid complex grammatical sentence structure and continually falls back on short phrases and limited vocabulary, and would likely be emerging on the can-do WIDA descriptors. So what do I do to help him? I often pair him with students. It's a small class, so I can do this pretty easily. He can practice his speaking skills, but I first have him write out his thoughts so that then all he has to do is read them rather than try to come up with the words on the spot. Students in the class have gotten really good and are kind and compassionate and have been asking him questions to gently probe him to get him to go a bit deeper with his responses. And he is really kind of a conundrum for me, and I'm working really hard to try and get him to come out and just practice his English skills and be more comfortable and confident in that area. Another class expectation are academic language functions that tie directly to the requirements of the AP US History exam, including the historical thinking skills. All of the AP essay prompts have students use specialized vocabulary, grammatical structures. Kids have to write thesis statements. And so we work really hard to make sure they understand those language functions. And they, in fact, can be seen in the prompts, those language functions, evaluating, comparing and contrasting, describing, etc. So these are some prompts from actual AP exams. And what I've done here is compared the actual historical thinking skills that are found on the AP exam that are assessed on the AP exam with academic language functions that we've examined in this class. And so they all really overlap, and the kids have to be able to do them in order to be successful in AP US History and to test well on that AP exam in the spring. So the next class expectation that can be problematic for my English language learners are the lexile levels, which typically exceed 1300, which is well above grade level expectations. Lots and lots of reading in my class, 10 to 20 pages a night is the expectation. And most of my kids, being 10th graders, read at a 920 to 1200 lexile level, depending on the student. My guess is my FLEP students would probably score on the lower end of that. And this deals with content load within the text and content vocabulary that is found within the text. For example, the Declaration of Independence by Thomas Jefferson well exceeds the levels of an average 10th grader. And in fact, it is exceeding the levels of a 12th grader as well. So it truly is college level material that these students are working with. So I have to figure out how to get them to where they need to be. So how do I get kids from A to B? That's my whole life, is trying to figure that out. Here's a writing example of these issues affecting students in my AP US History class. This was an actual prompt that we had this last week. Evaluate the extent to which the Declaration of Independence marked a turning point in American history, analyzing what changed and what stayed the same from the period immediately before the Declaration period immediately following it. So here we have a writing sample. This is one of my FLEP students She is struggling with her writing a bit, so we'll have to do some intensive one-on-one, especially I just got this on Friday. So we'll go through it together, she and I. But some things that I immediately notice with her writing, one, she's missing articles or has inaccurate articles, which are just basic tier 1 words, which is problematic. So here is an inaccurate article. She's having problems with plurals and having those plurals agree. She's talking about conflicts with loyalist and federalist. I'm assuming she's meaning more than one here. Missing articles again, should say the economy instead of economy was an issue. And then creative spellings and words being made, spelling errors. She's using the correct prefix, but the wrong root. Instead of saying demolished, she says demolished. That word actually shows up again. This next slide shows, again, not having the plurals correct, talking about a colonist instead of colonists. Here she uses the word destruct instead of destruct, so inaccurate prefixes. And unrespected, using the wrong prefix to create a word. So, hopefully, I am no longer the sage on the stage. I can't just move through life and teach and expect kids just to absorb my wisdom. I don't do too much drill and kill, and I don't do a lot of long, boring lectures. In fact, this is the format that I lecture in. I have an entirely flipped classroom, but that's for another day. I love how Ben Stein teaches vocabulary.
The Republican-controlled House of Representatives, in an effort to alleviate the effects of the the Great Depression, passed the the tariff bill, the Hawley-Smoot Tariff Act, which raised or raised tariffs in an effort to collect more revenue for the federal government. Did it work? Anyone know the effects? It did not work, and the United States sank deeper into the Great Depression. Today, we have a similar debate over this. Anyone know what this is, class? Anyone? Anyone seen this before? The Laffer curve. Anyone know what this says? It says that at this point on the revenue curve, you will get exactly the same amount of revenue as at this point. This is very controversial. Does anyone know what Vice President Bush called this in 1980? Anyone? Something DOO economics. Voodoo economics.
I love how Ben Stein tries to teach vocabulary content in this lecture, something DOO economics. For me, the previous example of writing that I showed has a lot of language usage errors which do need addressed. However, as a history teacher, I have to consider if the meaning gets lost in the language. Can I still assess whether or not this student knows her history? I would argue that she is showing and demonstrating some knowledge of U.S. history. Now, she still didn't hit a lot of the specific examples that she needs to, but she's getting there. Ben Stein does not use reading instruction. He just lectures and expects kids to know it. That's the old sage on the stage. But this is not how not to teach U.S. history. This is more my style. I'm the crazy lady from Harry Potter. Incorporating a variety of strategies for a variety of learners. I use all kinds of things and strategies such as to build background knowledge. I use vocabulary inventories as anticipatory sets to specifically teach content vocabulary, as well as building word walls. I use predictograms and exclusive brainstorming. I have kids chunk, chew, and check and use think, pair, share strategies by working with partners. Predictograms allow them to pre-tell stories and pair with students with multiple levels to help them build the background knowledge and expose them to vocabulary that they will encounter in the lessons. I work explicitly on building not only Tier 3 vocabulary, but also Tier 2 vocabulary. I've given students for use on their essays 2 placards that are on their desk called connector words and vivid verbs. These are process words, and I ask the students to experiment and try different word combinations when writing their essays in class. This serves 2 purposes. It builds their Tier 2 and 3 vocabulary, as well as getting students to start to create complex and compound sentence structure. According to our textbook, on page 256, effective writing involves deciding which ideas to emphasize and choosing the right conjunctions to show the relationship between ideas. So you have to explicitly teach students that, and I do that with these vocabulary activities. I also use metacognitive strategies, having students reflect on their own learning and learning processes and having them set their own SMART goals so that they can move forward. Here's some examples of the vivid verbs that I've laminated and given to the students, and I ask them to pick a couple to use and sprinkle throughout their essays just to begin to get familiar with these verbs. And these are the the connector words. I have them set up in groups. You have September words, December words, and March words. So in September, kids are good to use this through till December. In December, I expect them to be choosing words from the December list. And by March, I expect them to be using words from the March list, just to start to expand that vocabulary. I have students tracking their own data and setting their own SMART goals so that we can see growth, and we work really hard on a growth mindset in my class, and so that speaks to the metacognitive piece. So I have a dream that all students, regardless of their cultural backgrounds and their native language, can find a safe place to learn history in my classroom. I have a dream that all students, regardless of their language ability, can be successful on the AP US History exam. I have a dream that might be out there that all boys and girls will love history as much as I do, and that all students leave my class better informed, involved, and engaged citizens of the world. So thank you, Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you, Dr. Peralta, and everybody in class. It has been real.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream.
Thank you.